I'm trying to see if it's going up. Okay, so it looks like we're up. Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning into this panel on pursuing further education. My name is Brianna Christophers. I'm Princeton class of 2017, and I serve as one of the co-chairs of the Conexiones committee, which is a committee within the Association of Latino Princeton Alumni that plans events and engages in initiatives for students and young alums. At Princeton, I studied molecular biology and was co-president of Princeton Latinos y Amigos. I was going to be moderating today's panel, but I guess I will also be a panelist today. So I am a combined degree MD PhD student at Cornell in New York City. So I can talk a little bit about med school and grad school in the sciences. To introduce our panelists, we have Viviana Garza, class of 2010. Viviana Yolanda Garza has her master's in public administration and is currently the Women and Minority Business Enterprises Advisor for the Seattle Department of Transportation. And we also have Pilar Hernandez Escontrias, class of 2008. Pilar is the proud daughter of resilient Chicanx activists. She grew up in Riverside, California, and through the collective sacrifice of the generations, she made it to Princeton. She continued her studies at Cambridge University and earned a PhD in anthropology from Northwestern University. She's currently a third-year law student at UCI or UCL? UCI.
Mm-hmm.
UCI Law. And she's my fellow co-chair of the Conexiones committee. Dr. Isabel Ramirez, class of 2011, was supposed to join us today, but she is not feeling well. So she sends you all best wishes and encourages you guys to look her up on TigerNet and reach out if you need any help in considering medical school. So the topic today is pursuing further education. So I think we'll start with a question of how did you guys decide to pursue further education at Princeton, and why did you choose the degree that you did?
At Princeton or after Princeton?
After Princeton. After Princeton.
You want to go ahead, Pilar?
Sure. So I think I came to, first of all, thank you, Bree, for organizing this, and thank you to Viviana also, and to participate in this conversation. I think to frame it, we're all like very proud women of color who are here at your disposal to like answer any questions, and they can be, we are real talk kind of humans. So please feel free to ask any questions. And so I'll start it off with some realness. I decided to go to grad school because I felt really stupid after Princeton. I mean, that's like the honest truth. I graduated, my GPA was like, okay, you know, and I felt like I had gone to this incredible school and I hadn't explored my intellectual life nearly as much as I wanted to. Like my senior thesis was about sexuality. And my advisor had no idea how to engage or, you know, like with me on conversations of theories of gender and sex and all of this stuff, which I hear Princeton is a lot better at now, but at the time it was like not super queer friendly, not women of color idea friendly. So anyway, I left and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And I was like, I can be an opera singer or I can be an archaeologist. And so I applied to programs and I felt like, you know, I really need to explore my brains and I need to feel like I'm smart again. So that's honestly what took me to grad school. And then it's been a slow progression of feeling like I am the woman who, you know, merited entrance to a place like Princeton. Like, I think it's actually been a lifelong journey since then, since I was, you know, 18 or 17 when I moved there for the first time. So that's why. And then, I mean, I have like sort of professional reasons of why I got into the PhD in anthropology and why I became an archaeologist and the transition into law school. But I think it's important to start off by saying it's okay if your reasons are not necessarily because you have this clear vision of your professional life. Sometimes it's okay to be like, you know, I need to do this for me and for my family. And I have a full ride for some, you know what I mean? Or I got a huge scholarship. And so let me try to do it and let me get all the education I can for the ancestors who couldn't. Like, that's fucking legitimate. So that's kind of where I came from pursuing my higher ed.
I totally agree with Pilar. Leaving Princeton, I felt stupid. I felt like I had come right up to the undergrad degree feeling like, oh, I got this. I'm a smart Chicana. I can do this. I'm obviously going to succeed. And my experience at Princeton was not the most positive. So leaving that, I definitely had this idea of, well, I don't know, people tell me that I'm good at arguing. Maybe I should go into law school. And so I started preparing for that. I worked at a small class action law firm, and then I moved to the city attorney's office and worked as a legal clerk there. And so I started learning and living that life a little bit more. And my intention was to get as much information as I could and figure out, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm really excited. But honestly, I had been so tired from my Princeton degree that I didn't realize I was pushing myself to do something that I really wasn't interested in. So after that experience and actual work-life experience, I realized that I didn't love law, but I did want to have an impact that was going to be just as significant. So I wanted to pursue something that was going to hit on a larger and a potentially larger scale. I wanted to work on policy work and have that impact be at a larger scale, at least from my experience that I had, even with class action lawsuits, it was a certain very finite group of individuals who are able to get that type of remedy. And that could range from like anything from, I worked on a case against, Sherwin-Williams or Carl's Jr. for overtime meals and being mistreated in that way. So like, I wanted to be able to have that impact, but not have, you can only fit in this box if you were a worker between 2010 and 2012 and had this many hours. So I went and I took a look at public administration and public policy because I thought that would be something that could feed that piece of my soul to make that larger impact. But also I wanted to prove to myself that I was smart again. I wanted to prove that I could be the person that I had thought I was. So that was definitely a big piece. And I thank you, Pilar, for opening that, because I rarely hear people say that. And that's something really important that I want to make sure that folks know, that you don't have to, even if that reason doesn't feel, I don't know, noble, it's something that's true to you, and it's a real factor.
Thank you for that, Viviana. I guess I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up in an MD PhD program, or pursuing this very, very long road. So for me, I think I came into Princeton thinking about wanting to be a scientist. And I actually had no idea what that meant. Like, up until that point, like, the only science you're exposed to is like what's in your textbook or what your teacher says. And all I knew was that I really liked learning about those things. But I didn't know how any of the discoveries or things that happened that are in the books happened, right? So I got to Princeton and started taking classes, and I was like, oh, this is different than what I thought it was. But in a good way, in a good different, I think. It was really challenging, but also really exciting. And I kept going, even though it was really challenging, and sometimes that was hard. But going through Princeton, I think I had always had a little bit of a curiosity of what might it be like to be a physician. So I had always gone to kind of the health professions advising events and things like that. And in my junior year, during the summer, I was giving tours, Orange Key tours of Princeton, like admissions tours. And someone came up to me after one of the tours, okay, and she goes, "Oh, well, I'm a physician. I'm a neonatal cardiologist, and I, help the babies that have all of the heart conditions that you're studying in the lab." Because I had talked about what my thesis was going to be on, and we studied heart development in zebrafish, and the hope was to like come up with a better understanding of heart defects. So she said, "You should come to clinic with me and like see these children and understand this in a different context." And I think that kind of sealed the deal for me. I went. She was here in New York City. I went and shadowed her for a day, and that's what helped me realize, like, for me, science was not just what you do in lab or what you generate. It's how you can use that and those skills to help people. So, yeah. That's why MD PhD, although it's not the only path for sure to do what I want to do. Since I mentioned HPA, which I encourage all people who are considering pre-med and health professions to go to at Princeton, did you guys, did anyone or any office or any entity at Princeton have a role in your application process to your respective degree programs, or in thinking about that?
Okay, so I guess I'll start, and I'll say that I'm going to start off with a negative, but then I'm going to like switch it up, and I'm going to show how I wish I had approached things differently. So I'll say that not one person at Princeton told me I should apply to a master's program. Not one person told me I should apply to a PhD program. And so that was actually internally done. And I thank my parents for it, because my parents were like, "Mijita, you can make it to a PhD program. You can make it to a master's program." And I was like, who am I going to have write letters about? Like, nobody told me I should do this, right? So again, I think Princeton has changed in that way, and I think that that's wonderful. But also, what I wish most was that I was so deferential to Princeton, to this institution, and I was so deferential to the professors that I never went up to anyone and said, "Hey, do you think that, will you help me? Will you help me do applications for a PhD program?" I didn't go up to anyone to ask them for that, and even when I was asking for my letters of recommendation at that point, my professor said, "Oh, you'd be great," like as if it, they had never thought about it, but they were like, "Oh, you'd be great in these programs." So I wish I had been more aggressive in advocating for myself. And I think this is like a times have changed sort of thing, because that was already like 11 years ago. But here's what I will say. What did Princeton provide in the background? It provided this sort of like eternal name of importance. Like, my GPA was MERP. As I said before, when I applied to Cambridge, the professor who was there said, "Okay, sure, you have a GPA that's like not the best GPA, but it's a GPA from Princeton, and that means a lot." And so the name got me through a lot of doors and got me over a lot of hurdles that I really didn't, as silly as it sounds, I didn't think it would do. I was just sort of exhausted from graduation, and I didn't think like, what is Princeton in the larger context of the US, right? And the larger context of like the history of elite capital and elite wealth and elite knowledge. So I think Princeton helped a lot in that way. But in terms of institutional support for me to secure a PhD, it was not the place where I got that. And I can provide some suggestions if that's maybe one of the later questions, like suggestions for students about how to insist on that institutional support. I have guidance because I've since learned how to be a little more confident with myself and who I am. But at the time, it didn't really offer very much, unfortunately.
Similar to Pilar's experience, I also didn't really have folks telling me that I could or should pursue anything. I actually had some wise advisor, my senior thesis advisor. She did say, don't do something just because people have been telling you you should do it. Why don't you take a minute to breathe? You've had an experience here at Princeton, and maybe you just need some time to think about what you want to do and who you want to be. I didn't really take that into a lot of, I really have a lot of thought about that. I wanted to just kind of go, have the experience of what I had and move forward and show that I deserved this degree. But in retrospect, that was really a wise thing to let me know, because that was something that if I didn't have the years of experience that I had had before going into grad school, I would not have probably chosen that path. I think that similar to what Pilar was mentioning, I think that I also did not take the initiative to make that connection with professors, which, in grad school, that's the incomplete opposite of what I ended up doing, making those connections right away, having those one-on-ones in office hours. That really helps build that network that I didn't realize I needed to be doing. I did have, thankfully, the connection to some of the Latino professors and some of the women and gender professors, which is what I had my certificate in. But that kind of saved me a little bit when I was doing the application process for the Master in Public Administration, because I was really surprised how kind and kind of in giving of their time they were 5 years or 4.5 years after I had graduated. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember this very minute, tiny thing. And even if I didn't, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you got most out of this class? And I'm happy to help. So I think that I was surprised at the network I had, even though I thought I hadn't built anything, and how giving of their time they were, especially the women and the female professors that I still had connections to. But they were also, what I appreciated, they were very straightforward. So if there was something that they believed, particularly my senior thesis advisor, she was like, are you sure you're ready to do this? Because I remember when we talked last, this wasn't really something you were in the headspace for. So I don't know. I think that that's what I got out of Princeton. And of course, definitely. And something that I didn't want to be using, honestly, is the name. That's something that I think that for me, I didn't feel like I deserved the name after graduating. And I purposely did not lead with, I graduated from Princeton. I looked for different opportunities where I could showcase my strengths without saying that I was connected to Princeton. And then I had to slip the resume in with the job application, and then that became a thing. So going into grad school, that's definitely something that with or without my intention, that was a name that sticks out and gave me that little push. I know for certain that the grad school I ended up attending, I ended up applying late, and the admissions officer took a look at both my statement, my recommendations, and my transcript. And even though the GPA was also the admissions officer was like, yeah, you know what? I think that this is something that this is a person, because of your background and because of what you're presenting. This is somebody that we need to have in our class. So it did have that little push, and that was something I do appreciate.
Thank you both for sharing that. And I think it relates, or both of you have kind of touched on, since Princeton, you've developed strategies now to build a little community of mentors around yourself. And one of the questions from someone watching relates to that. What are your strategies, or how have you gone about finding those mentors and connecting with them?
You want to go?
Okay, so sure, I'll go. So one of them, I think it comes from within. I think it comes from inside of you to feel the worthiness. Viviana, you brought up worthiness, this idea of having been worthy of graduating, having been worthy, being worthy of a professor's time, right? Like, this guy's so important, this woman's so important, they have so many things to do, they're writing so many articles. I'm not valuable enough to impede on their time and to take over space in their office, right? So that's number one, is you need to get over that. Number one is you are worthy and you are valuable and you're special. And it's not just because you have a differing opinion, although that positionality that you occupy is very important. And it makes you inherently worthy, right? So that's number one. And I think confidently, it's so interesting how power works. I've learned so much about power in graduate school. Those individuals who are very deferential to power and who say, like, I don't want to impose, those, and that's how I used to be, those are the people who don't get invited to the meetings, after office hours. Let's go grab a drink with a bunch of classmates and students and professors. And the students who don't really take up space intentionally are kind of left out of that very important social gathering where decisions are made and where, people develop a dynamic and relationship. So that's another part of, I think, especially in Latino communities, women are raised in a very particular way to show respect and deference, and we value it. And it's beautiful to be, very deferential to our elders. But our professors, although they are elders, are also looking for future colleagues. So this is the very important thing, right? They're looking for people who they will cultivate into the generation of leadership who, when they leave, will take the department chair over. So that means that you need to be a person who's like, hey, I know that I'm struggling in your class and I'm here meeting with you to talk about how I can do better. Or professor, I've gotten to the point now in my life where I feel confident very respectfully critiquing professors in law school and sort of saying, your examples given in evidence class about that always go back to OJ or the Menendez brothers or whatever, invoke imagery of the Black and brown male who is hyperviolent, right? Can't we pick some white men to use in your evidence class to show examples of problematic behavior? So in those ways, I bring in my anthropological background. I have a lot more confidence. Part of it is just growth and confidence. But I think the first two things is know you deserve a space there. And secondly, take up that space with a lot of ganas. Don't just sort of sit humbly in a corner being grateful. We can do that with our families, and we can be humble and grateful with our parents and all of that, and sort of express our insecurities of not being there, but and also find your crew, right? Find other, and I really encourage you to find women of color who you guys build up and you sort of say, yes, girl, you need to go talk to that professor. Walk on up there. I'll walk with you, those sorts of communal power creations, I think are really important. And then in terms of a final strategy, following up. So you had a great meeting with the professor, you've rearranged kind of elements of your master's thesis, or you have a new article idea, or you want to publish in Medium. You go and give that professor, follow up with a link and say, Professor, I really appreciated our conversation. In fact, it changed how I looked at X, Y, and Z, and now my paper's on blah, blah, blah. So you're demonstrating to them, that's the third thing, is you're demonstrating the ability to be a creative, community thinker, right? And you're giving back, and it's reciprocity. And because if you want to go into academia, for example, or if you want to go into any job, collaboration is key. They like to see that you know how to collaborate. And so I think that kind of that rounding it out with the circle of this is what I got from our time together is always a positive thing when you're trying to gain mentorship.
Quickly, I'll add that putting yourself in spaces to meet new people, and I say this as an introvert where that is very challenging sometimes, but for example, even at Princeton, deciding to go to a seminar or a talk, where it's in the field that you're interested in. Maybe the talk isn't exactly like the most up your alley, but you'll be there, you'll, you know, see people in that department, including professors you may have had or not had, and it gives you an opportunity to engage folks on, you know, the question that they asked the speaker, or how it related to something that you learned in their class, or whatever it may be. Like, try to start finding these little small ways to connect to folks and like start a conversation, so that they get to know you in that way, and that they see you. When people start seeing you over and over again at things, you know, they take it seriously that this is a topic of interest for you, or that, you know, that's something you want to pursue, or whatever it is. And they'll start saying hello to you just because they recognize who you are. And that frees you up to then start moving into those bigger asks of, hey, I am interested in someday writing an article or a paper, or, you know, maybe my thesis will be on this and that. What do you think? And you start building like bigger relationships with people that literally started with a tiny little question at some random event. That's how I've met some of my like biggest mentors, frankly.
Yeah, I agree with the putting yourself in spaces of interest. That's something I agree. It's something that introverts, at least for myself, it's been really difficult. It's hard for me to conceptualize what I'm going to get out of it because I'm putting so much into it just to physically be there. But I think that is something definitely, Bree, that has for me helped open up a lot of doors, and for folks to kind of see that that I'm there, I'm ready to be collaborative, even if it's a space I'm not usually seen in. I think that for me, when I'm thinking about mentorship, there's that aspect of professors, there's that aspect, or the element of, you know, professors being mentors, there's the element of professional folks being mentors, and having what Pilar was mentioning, having your crew. I think that for me, a lot of the mentorship that has ended up being really significant have been my peers. I mean, don't get me wrong, my professors and the administration and the professionals that I've interacted with, they have definitely put me in spaces that I would never have been in, and I am so thankful for. But having that confidence that, you know, my peers are here looking at me and encouraging me to continue with my effort, even if it is just figuring out what I want to do and what type of spaces and things I'm interested in, that really gave me a lot of confidence. And even if like not full confidence, almost that like I think that I might be able to do it. I'm here, having your crew there saying, you know what, you should go. This is something that you're interested in, even if marginally. Go and try it and see what comes of it. That really for me helped me feel that I could be vulnerable, I could test different waters, and help me have that openness to other areas of interest. Like for me, I never would have thought coming out of a public administration degree that I would go into the Department of Transportation. That was just something that's literally never was in my mindset. And it wasn't transportation, honestly, is not something that I'm super passionate about. There's a lot of folks who are very, very interested and passionate. I didn't have that entrance, so I was not interested in that. My piece was more about equity and what it means for generational wealth, and having that racial equity analysis. And so I thought I was going to be looking into different spaces, and this is where I got pulled into. And because I had friends and honestly, like professors and some of my previous employers who were like, you know what, this is something that you should think about, I was able to do that and move into that direction. But also putting yourself into those spaces that are a little less comfortable, and showing up as your full self, is a good, like, a good memory of you. And so I've been here in Seattle for 4 years. And in that time, I've built a different network of folks who I'll get emails or phone calls from them saying, oh yeah, Viviana did this and this at this certain time in her grad school career, and she's doing this now. She's somebody you should connect with to get some, advice or experience about what she had gone through, and if she can, that might be able to help you. So having that positive, or it's the memory of what you've done and where you've been, that creates a bigger network. And helps build you as well as whatever you're working for and towards.
Bree, can I add just something after having listened to Viviana? So I think a lot of us, it is performative. Being in the world is a performative act, right? And we bring different personas to different areas. What is the key? Authenticity. Like, who is it that you want to present? I have zero problems going into a courtroom with my hoop earrings and my red lipstick. Is that going to turn off some folks? Yes. Does that mean that I will not get a clerkship with a particular judge? Yeah, probably. Cat eye too is like all a little bit too much. And I'm a big woman. So it's like, there's so many elements, right? But you have to be comfortable with yourself. And then I guess the second part to that is that you ask for what you want. Like, I've gone up to people and I've actually made them uncomfortable when I'm like, hi, I'm a 33-year-old Chicana who's going into the legal profession. I need a mentor. I really like this about you. Would you be down to mentor me? And they can at that point be like, I love how much you're communicating with me. Or they can say, let me get back to you. Or they can, be awkward with you. But that's still you being your authentic self and asking for the things that you need. Don't perform some role that you don't feel comfortable performing, because everyone can spot a fake. And if you're going into, for example, teaching, your students are going to spot that you're fake. If you go into being a lawyer, the number one folks who spot a fake from a mile away are clients. If you're going into medicine, who spots a fake? They're patients. So there will always be a constituency who you need to connect to the most. And if you're not authentic because you've been performing so much to get to the highest level with mentors and professors or whatever, you're missing like the most important reason why you're doing what you're doing. So I just wanted to follow up with Viviana, who mentioned authenticity. And I think that's like spot on. That's the most important.
Thank you both for all of that. Let's take a step back and think back to what you were thinking about when you were putting a list together of where you were going to submit an application to. What were some of the things that went into your mental algorithm for saying, yes, I want to apply to this place. No, I don't want to apply to that place. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take the first stab. Honestly, coming out from Princeton's experience, I had this belief, or at least this false understanding of what should be the group of schools that I end up applying to. And honestly, it leaned towards this high name value, because that's where I had started from, with Princeton having this name value, and this thought kind of was pervasive in my mind of, well, it's kind of gotten me this far. What if, even if I don't love it in these other places, what if I just, keep doing that? Because it seems like it's might be the thing you're supposed to be doing. So I had a list of I think it was like 6, maybe 5 or 6 schools that were very, you look up number 1 through 5 on all of the lists of public policy schools, and those are the ones that I wanted to go to. And it wasn't necessarily because I liked those places at all. And what ended up happening is my friend who lived in Seattle, he's one of my best friends, he ended up telling me, there's a great school here. And it's public administration. It's got a mix of the management piece that you're excited about and that you're good at, and the policy piece that you want to learn. So you should take a look at it. As a matter of fact, I already let the admissions office know that you're going to be contacting them, and so just like give them a call because they're waiting for your call. So I had a little bit of a pushy friend, but he really was looking for what was best for who I was rather than what my idea of where I should be, because this is, again, when we're talking about a performative piece, this was I thought people expected me to do. And that's the school that I ended up going to. Honestly, very, very honestly, also because the other schools didn't want me. I get it. I actually am very, very excited and happy that that's the experience that I ended up getting to have, because I get to share with folks, the top 5 schools, whatever, in the country. I was not the fit for them. And this school that ended up having a focus and being able to let me live my experience in the best way possible, I was able to be the best that I could be in that realm. I was able to prove to myself that I was smart again, and not saying that it's not a difficult school. It was very difficult, but I was also able to engage in a lot of causes and areas that I was never probably going to be able to focus on. I was, president of my student government and really focused on a lot of the inequities amongst the students and issues of representation and hiring. And so anyway, going off into the world of that, I think that when we're thinking about where we want to go, and this is we as in the folks who are watching or who might be listening later, please don't think that there is something that you're supposed to be doing. Really think about where you want to go, where you want to be, and the type of program that it's going to be, but also the folks that you might be able to connect with there. So if there's like a really exciting professor or program that's kind of niche that is doing some cool stuff, maybe reach out to them first and feel the waters a little bit. But don't necessarily go or apply and think about it the way that I had started off. I'm really glad that I didn't end up going that direction. I probably would be a lot less happy. But I just wanted to give my experience and be very honest about that, because that was a huge factor. And that was my experience.
For me, it was really simple. So I just want to throw it in there. Location. So for MD PhD programs, it could be anywhere from like 7 to 9 years. And I did not want to live, let's say 9 years, hopefully not, somewhere where I would be miserable because of, I don't know, just the environment, right? And to feel limited in how I could grow as a person or like do what I wanted to do or be or how I wanted to live because of location. So that kind of helped a lot, but that is also like a very long-term decision.
So I took a couple, as Bree mentioned, I have my PhD and I got it from Northwestern, and I got it because, well, I also applied to places that didn't accept me. I mean, I applied, here's the reality, when you come from Princeton, you made it to the top, right? Like, so, and you start thinking like, oh, I can't go, I have to stay at the top. I have to maintain this position at the top. But actually, like, what you realize is that there are things that are far more important than being at the top in this particular way. Like, I wasn't at the top of my personal life. I wasn't at the top of my joy. I wasn't feeling all of my joy completely, right? So I think like checking in with yourself and reassessing what is the thing that's most important for me in this phase. I imagine many of the people who are listening right now are younger, like in their early 20s, 23, 24. Take this opportunity to apply for jobs and grad school far away from home, you know, like travel, do the things our parents couldn't do. And, you know, assuming that you're able to, like, I got a full ride to Northwestern. I lived in Chicago for 6 years and I worked, and that was really exciting. That's not my life now. I want to be close to my mama and papa. Like, real talk, y'all. My parents are aging. I am entering a new phase of my life. So for me, applying to law school as a 30-year-old was very different than applying to a PhD program as a 23-year-old. Because I had my fun. I lived in Peru for numerous years to do my PhD dissertation work, was living my best life, reggaetonera, like all the things, okay? Loving all kinds of people from all over the world. And now I'm like, I don't regret anything. And now I need to be with my mom, and I need to make sure my mom's good. And I don't feel guilt, and I don't feel like I'm being held back. So part of that is thinking at any given stage in your life, what is it that's most important and personal for you? So that does mean, where are you going to find community? If you want to have a family at some point, where do you want to have kids? Where would you want to raise your children? With what values, if that's something that's on your path? Or, you know, what kind of activist community do I want to be involved in? Do I want to be in Arizona, which is where I'm applying for jobs right now, because for our gente, like, or do I want to stay in LA and, you know,
Pilar, are you still there?
We got frozen.
Oh no.
Oh no, Pilar.
Okay, well, we get Pilar back. Oh, looks like she's coming back. See, these are the challenges you have with a virtual panel that you don't have with an actual, like, in life, real life.
Right, we're not going to start buffering.
Right, no one freezes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I feel you. How about that comment right there? I feel you.
Viviana, do you want to talk a little bit about the financial side of applying?
Yeah. It's definitely something to consider before you apply. I'm going to stop talking anytime Pilar comes back.
Yeah.
But for me, I think I applied to 5 or 6 schools in each of the applications. And it's similar to undergrad, but at least in my experience, when I was applying to undergrad, I was able to do a lot of waivers. Waivers are a little bit harder to come by in grad school. At least that was my experience. I would have to directly ask the admissions office versus, you know, here's a waiver that it was something that's part of the undergrad application process. At least that was my experience. It was a lot easier. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about this. These applications are going to be between $50 to $75 each-ish, at least let's average, and then applying to about 5 or 6. So that's something. It's something that you got to be considerate of for yourself, especially depending on what your situation is. I was a working professional working as a legal clerk in the city attorney's office. And this was going to be a little bit of a tough pull for me, even though I was, you know, living with my mom at the time. So I was able and taking care of my dad. And so it was going to be a little bit of a push, but it was something that I had to plan for. So I think that's what you're asking about. Let me know if that's not fully what you're thinking about. Yeah. And the other pieces too, you have to consider the cost of grad school that it's going to be when, hey, Pilar, you're back.
Hi. No ticket festival.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
No. Please continue.
I'll just finish my sentence and then I would like to hear more of what you were saying. I think that one of the things to consider, it's not just the cost of the application, but also you got to think about how much it's going to be afterwards and how you're going to be paying for it.
Mhm.
I was really lucky with Princeton. I was able to get some significant grants and scholarships, and my parents ended up being able to pay off with the like parent loan, at least a piece of it. So I ended up leaving undergrad with no debt, and that was beautiful. And it was amazing, and I was so excited. So going to grad school, that was 100% going to be me. My family was not going to be able to support me on that, and I was not going to ask them for it. This was my experience and my burden that I wanted to have. So that is something to definitely consider, because grad school, at least in my experience, it's a lot harder to be able to get those different funding sources unless you're I think my peers in going into academia might have a little bit of a different experience, but I think that that's also a whole nother world of difficult experiences that you have to be like with being a TA and all of those pieces. But at least in my experience, especially with a degree that is supposed to be supposedly like directly professionally focused, there's a lot fewer opportunities for scholarships and for any type of, the difference between scholarships and like the other word that people always throw around. So you're going to be taking the full brunt of the monetary issue. And not only that, that's something let's say you're going to do grad school, or you're thinking of doing grad school somewhere that's not near a place that you like your family, you're not able to live with your family. You're going to have to take into context living and cost of living and housing and all of those pieces. So that's what I did. I moved to, and it's not too far, I guess, from California to Washington, and everything was on my own. So I had to be mentally prepared and ready to be paying for that for the foreseeable future. And that could be a whole nother conversation that I have, because I love this. And I also talk about refinancing and student loans and all of the student loan stuff now very openly with my friends and colleagues, because I've refinanced twice, and it's a topic that I'm very excited about and interested in. But you can totally be okay. So just have that be something that is a serious thing to think about. And it's totally okay if that means that you have to wait a couple of years or reconsider the type of degree that you're going into. Like maybe it's not going to be you physically at an institution. Maybe that's an online preparation class. And be okay with that, and have that be okay for you to think about an experience, because they're all valid ways of getting where you want to be. So anyway, money is something that's going to be a really big factor. Just know that there are a lot of sources that have had this experience and can try to help you through it, even if it doesn't mean that they can give you a huge monetary amount. And also, don't be afraid to ask your institution for help. That's what I did my second year, and they ended up being able to cut half my costs. And on top of that, I was able to find some jobs that were able to give me stipends and pretty easy work. So be open with your financial situation. It's uncomfortable, but people are understanding. So yeah, that's been my experience.
To follow up on that, like I remember at Princeton, I don't know if it's still this way, but nobody talked about not having money. Like I didn't even tell, my best friend, I didn't even tell my best friend the personal financial struggles my parents were going through or I was going through. And I wish it wasn't until I studied abroad where I had friends who were like, hey, let's go out to dinner. And then another friend would be like, hey guys, I don't have the money to. And then everyone would say, okay, let's just eat at home. It wasn't until then that I actually had friendships of honesty like that. Because Princeton didn't cultivate those types of relationships. Excuse me. So I have felt very increasingly comfortable being honest about when I don't have the money to apply. So like when I applied to law school, I went straight in for those waivers. I was like, I made $30,000 last year as part of my job because I'm doing good for the world. So like I cannot be paying $125 per application. That's how much law schools are, 100 to 125. So I got waivers for all of them, and I applied to 20 law schools. When it came to getting money, I got a $15,000 scholarship at UCI. That was my first offer. And I went into the admissions. I drove down to the admissions folks and I said, listen, y'all read my personal statement, right? Yes. I'm like, you saw the struggle that my family went through to send me to Princeton, right? Yes. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. So I will have to respectfully decline this very generous offer. I'll take my chances on other schools that can give me more money. I was very like confident and calm and just saying, you know, and I also said, honest, I also don't need this. Like I knew my power, right? So like know your position of power at any given moment. And that is coming from a position of privilege. So I acknowledge that I had that privilege because I had a PhD in hand already. So when I was applying, I was like, you know, I could go work at a nonprofit, make 70 a year. Like I don't need a law degree. It would help me do the things that I want to do for my community in a much better way, but I don't need it. And that was on a Friday. And on a Monday, I got an email from the head of admissions telling me I got a full ride for all 3 years. So like, praise God and praise the ancestors. And, you know, it wasn't just me. What I'm saying is that like, there's a reason why they want you there. There's a reason they want you there, and then find out what that reason is. I knew for me, wasn't because of my LSAT score, wasn't because of my undergrad GPA. Those are the only two measures they care about in law schools. It was because I had a PhD, and they thought that could really add to the programmatic, you know, life and the community and all of that. So I was like, okay, this is my strength. Go hard, Billy, or like don't go at all, right? So that's the approach I took, and I think that's, you know, do the things that white men feel very comfortable doing for 500 years, going into a space, owning that space, declaring it theirs. Like it's okay for us to reoccupy and recolonize. So
briefly on the med school side, it is expensive, like so unbelievably expensive. There's 2 rounds of applications that you got to pay for, which is absurd. Then you got to pay to go interview at these places and like all of this stuff. It's expensive. That being said, fee waivers exist. And if you qualify it, look into the fee assistance program through the AAMC, because they will cover not only all of your study materials for the MCAT and the cost of taking the MCAT, which in itself is like $350, but they'll also cover your first 20 applications to medical schools. So look into whether you qualify for it. Since we are getting close to the end of our time together, I want to address, and I guess this also relates to like one of the questions I was going to ask anyway. So one of the people watching has asked, any advice for someone currently applying to law school, recently took the LSAT and feeling a little of that I'm not smart anymore feeling you all had mentioned before. So thoughts on just advice for applying, things you maybe didn't expect while applying and surviving the application process.
Apply early. I can't overstate this enough. Start your application immediately. I submitted all my applications in March. And so I got a lot at that point, you know, they were pretty much like 90% filled every class. So it was challenging to get an acceptance, and I was rejected from most of the places I applied. So number 1, apply early. Number 2, have people reading over your personal statements who've gone through this process. And because what happens is that, for example, if you're applying to UCs and, you know, places that have pretty consistent applications, they may say 500-word personal statement. That's nothing. A personal statement of 500 words, no es casi nada. Okay, it's nothing. So, but they will have like 3 other essays. So what's the story of this essay? What's the story of this essay? And then how does that complement my CV or my resume and my cover letter? Like there's just so many pieces that you want to get maximum information out of yourself in that. So you don't want overlap, you don't want any of that. And that takes kind of a critical eye. And so I find out who are the critical eyes in your life. And I'm willing, whoever asked the question, if you want to send me your materials, I'm happy to read through them and give you any feedback. And don't be ashamed of expressing like why you want to go into this. So one of the things I said on my law school applications was, I understand the law as a tool of oppression that's oppressed people of color for 500 plus years. And that's not every school is going to like it, but you have to decide, ask yourself, who do I want to be? Do I want to be a fully authentic self? Do I want to be a slightly abridged version of myself? So that's something you have to ask yourself, and then speak to whoever your mentors are in this process and say like, this is kind of the person I want to relay, so that they can help you refine your cover statement. And then I would reach out. The difference between law school and grad school generally is that in grad school, you're working with a particular person. However, the faculty at law schools are really powerful. I mean, super powerful, super, super, super powerful. So reach out to professors whose work interests you. Read an article of these professors, kind of pretend like it's law school, because like it's a grad school application. At the end of the day, those professors are going to write to head of admissions because they have a say. And they're going to say like, this person reached out to me, this person came and visit. If you're local, go and visit the school and let them see your face and say, I really want to come here. So reaching out to professors, I think, is a really valuable thing to do as well.
Yeah, I think one of the question was about also the LSAT piece. I also took the LSAT in my last year of Princeton, which was not a great idea because I basically spent the summer, I was in an a cappella group, both doing a cappella and working with, I was also Ballet Folklorico, doing that stuff, dealing with like personal family trauma stuff, and preparing for the LSAT. So I didn't end up doing very well in the LSAT, but it also wasn't awful. So the thing is, I talked about this earlier, my mentality was, if I wasn't the best, then why was I trying? Mm-hmm. So that was something that was very, very disheartening for me. And so I hear you when you're saying that you took the LSAT and you're feeling like you're not that smart, or you're not smart anymore. The LSAT is one test. It's a test that, I don't know if folks Pilar knows, like, folks have taken this test. I love Revisionist History, the podcast, and Malcolm Gladwell does this really great segment about the LSAT and how ridiculous it is. But it's a ridiculous exam. It doesn't mean that it's not an important exam that is at least taken with large importance. I don't think it's an important exam, but it has a lot of weight. But there are methods and ways to boost your application, even with a middling or low middling score. Mm-hmm. It also, you should take into consideration, you can retake the exam. It is expensive. The expense is a piece. But if that's something that's a concern for you based on the schools that you're looking into, definitely take that into context and into consideration. But kind of like what Pilar was mentioning, this is a whole application. And so this is grad school and law school. This is a whole application. I applied with my GPA score and was able to get into a school that is one of the top 12, I guess, in this whatever, I don't know, the
U.S. World News Report.
Yeah, those reports. I don't look at them anymore because this is just what the school yells at. So I don't know, and they are evaluated on different things. That's a whole other thing. Mm-hmm. But I think the issue is, you really need to think about it as a whole, rather than your LSAT score is going to determine who you are and where you're going to be. So mm-hmm. There are other pieces, your personal statement, the other, I only got halfway there on the LSAT piece, but with grad school, it was the recommendations, mm-hmm. personal statement, as well as I think they asked for an additional essay about what you wanted to do with this degree. So just like, I understand it. Be able to feel all of this disheartened and upsetness, but don't like let that be who you are. Just live in that for as long as you need to, and then push forward, because that shouldn't stop you.
I think there's also like a spiritual element, and maybe that's good to, sort of end with that, is like, and I don't mean this in a religious way or any sort of way other than what's for you won't go by you. And those schools that reject you because of an LSAT are not going to be the places where you're going to thrive.
Yep.
Because they will be targeted specifically at people who can test very well, but maybe aren't thinking about social institutions. And I'll tell a story about I took the LSAT twice. The first time, and I took the, Barbary like prep, and I spent $3,000 that I did not have and put on a credit card. And my score went up like 5 points, which was just enough to like basically say, I'm not as horrible as I looked before, but it was like still mediocre. But I was taking this LSAT the first time, and I read this. They did the quantitative type of like order, like if the bus A leaves from terminal 1 and goes in this direction, and bus B leaves from terminal B and goes in that direction, and they're each going 10 miles an hour. I mean, they did this whole thing which bus arrives first at the terminal. And my head, you know what I was thinking? I was like, well, is this in East LA? Is this a bus in South Central? Because they don't care about people in South Central.
They won't stop.
No. Is this a bus? Well, is this a bus in Beverly Hills? And it has very nice, clean streets that are efficient and lights that are working and no potholes. I mean, my whole head this is where my brain went. So that's not what the LSAT's testing. That's not what a lot of your law schools will test. And so a lot of the law schools that privilege test taking abilities are not going to be in there talking about slavery as the original form of property, or marriage as like one of the first oppressive contracts. Like, they're not going to be doing that. So you need to ask yourself, do I want to be in a space that's critical? And if so, like, I might just have to put in this mediocre LSAT score and really buffer up the rest of me and who I am. But my best friend wanted to go, for example, to a top school. So he spent, I think, 10,000 plus he also didn't have, but he got private tutors. He thought it was fun. He was like, put it on his credit card, and he got into a top school because it wasn't so important to him to have, to be fully accepted in that way. Like, he wanted to make it to the top, and that was his goal. So you have to do some looking in yourself and say, like, what's most important to me, and take a spiritual approach and say, everything will be fine. Here's the thing, you all have already made it. You made it to the top university, probably worldwide, and you are doing so much for your families. And it's so much, like, it's so beautiful to go home and see my dad's Princeton hat. I put Princeton alum on my dad's car, on my mom's car. My mom's like, Dad didn't go to Princeton. Yes. And I'm like, girl, you went to Princeton. You went there with me. So you have done the work. You have made it. And this is just the flourishing of your life. This is like the fun that comes after it, because you've put in enough work and you are worthy enough now.
All right. I think we're going to wrap with that.
Cool.
Thank you all for being here with me and with everybody, and for sharing your stories, your experiences, and your advice on pursuing further education. To those watching, thank you. To those watching later, also thank you. And
to our future employers, I'm sorry for saying the F word. I forgot this was going to be in an archive forever. But also, if you don't like me, I guess that's
oh my goodness. I want to encourage you to reach out to us. So contact ALPA right down there. And we, just tell us what you're thinking, what you need help with, and we will help connect you to not only us and people on the ALPA board, but like hopefully anybody who would like to help you in the ALPA network, nationwide and worldwide. So
if you do have any questions for us individually too, feel free to connect with Bree or connect with us directly. I think that we provided our contact information, and ALPA definitely has it.
Great.
But like we all have had a lot of experiences in so many different sectors, private, public, nonprofit. Just like connect with us if just even for coffee in the area, because we're here. We understand that this is why we're doing this. We're here to make a community and to make sure that our community and our efforts and are going to continue. So don't feel concerned that you're going to bother us. Please do connect if you feel like you'd like to do that.
All right. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
There.